Participatory culture reveals itself in different disciplines throughout the internet. It often serves multiple purposes and attempts to achieve different things. We're going to use 3 completely different and individualized examples to show how participatory culture can generate discussion, give people a voice, and inspire change. Formula One is a worldwide motorsport with a yearly cumulative audience of 1.5 billion. The sport continues to evolve to maintain its status of the pinnacle of racing and automotive technology. The constant evolution of the sport encourages discussion, and therefore it has an immense online presence. There are F1 groups and cultures all around the internet. Some of these groups prefer talking about certain aspects of the sport, such as the technical individual parts of the cars, while others prefer to talk about the teams and the drivers, the politics, and the relationships between them. There are even people known for taking a satirical approach or just making memes about the drivers and the teams and the news that's relevant to the sport. Now, there are various types of participants in this online and participatory culture. They range from professionally hired reporters and talking heads, pundits, to individual people just who have an interesting take on it. And really anybody can get on a video and talk about what they want to talk about. And if they have an interesting enough point, they can make waves in the community. It really is that big of a community that anybody can do that, where I've seen YouTube channels start from nothing and just grow to hundreds of thousands of subscribers over the course of just maybe a couple years. So with all of that, it really makes the barriers to entry very low, as anybody can just jump in and start learning and discussing and contributing to the culture that surrounds this sport. A massive sport like this with millions of fans just shows how anything can really encourage a culture and start a discussion where people can be a viewer of something and a consumer, but also a contributor as well.
What's good? So today my argument is if religious content that is currently being made is falls under the category of participatory content, and how that falls in line with the concepts of producage as we've learned in class. So my perspective is on this whole, I would say there's a movement going on where religion and religious ideas are becoming more accessible through social media. And like some examples that I have are like Jefferson Deathkey, which this is him right here, who does a lot of religious easy content. This is also another example. But in my mind, so with participatory culture, it invites those to participate, those to relate, and I think religious content has been shifted in that arena so that it's less preaching the gospel and more of asking those to relate to the gospel, which I disagree with. That's a whole other story, but I think that there's been a shift in this religious representation in media, and now it's asking those to relate to the content and to share it, and it's transmedia, it's remixable in the fact that people can take other people's testimonies and how they did them and then do them for themselves. It's certainly global. I think that the content that's being shared that's religious based is not just in the US. And it also is increasingly independent. And this is kind of the issue that I have with it, and that it's becoming less about the actual content and more about the people who are interacting with it. And with producage, I really just think that it's a large wave of contributing people. So yeah, this is my area in this video, and I just wanted to talk about that in specific terms to participatory culture and producage, both things that we've talked about in class, and invite you all to think about how this has changed from sermons to more responding with the word, more responding with each other, more of making each other's testimonies, and the participatory culture that goes along.
The hashtag Insulin for All is a strong example of participatory culture in the Twitter community. This culture is based off of the Insulin for All campaign, which unites the diabetic community to fight together for access to diabetes supplies, care, and treatment for all type 1 diabetics. The community uses the hashtag to connect with other type 1 diabetics with the content and creating their own contribution using the hashtag, and usually talking about their struggle, like paying for medication or offering up other supplies in certain areas. The Insulin for All hashtag meets the criteria for participatory culture for many reasons. This hashtag can be found on Instagram, Twitter, and sometimes even Facebook. To enter this culture, most of the time you will find that the individual posting is a type 1 diabetic, an advocate for type 1 diabetes, or a loved one of a type 1 diabetic, or even all three. The hashtag and movement also promotes a strong sense of support for creating and sharing one's experience with each other. Members of the community are important and their contributions do matter, not only in their own lives, but in the lives of others too. There are no real countercultures of this movement. It's supposed to be a positive, helpful, and supportive community. And this hashtag Insulin for All is a largely supportive culture that helps people feel like they belong to a community that needs some extra support. When considering the Insulin for All movement in relation to Jenkins' 6 provisions of content, one can observe that this trend does in fact line up with the Jenkins 6 criteria, which are transmedia, participatory, remixable, spreadable, global, and increasingly independent. So this Insulin for All challenge is a good example of being transmedia and the fact that the movement can be shared on several different platforms. As I mentioned earlier, Twitter is a great one and it's the leading platform, but it can also be found on Instagram and Facebook as long as it matches with the Facebook guidelines of the group. This trend is also incredibly participatory in the fact that it invites individuals to contribute to their own experience as a type 1 diabetic, and I myself am one to put out my struggles and my supplies out in the community. It's also remixable in the sense that people offer up not only insulin, but various other supplies like lancets, ketone strips, amongst other items. As far as spreadability, like I've said before, the supplies are able to be spread across different platforms with their ability to be retweeted, shared, liked, commented, and posted. This Insulin for All movement is also global in the fact that 463 million people across the world are living with type 1 diabetes. Finally, this trend is very independent because each individual living with type 1 diabetes, their story is different, their journey to self-love is different, their ability to pay for medication is different. So everybody is different and tells something different and has a different short story to share. If you are a type 1 diabetic, I encourage you to join the movement just like I have. I have it in my bio of my Twitter and also my Instagram account. And I encourage you to be open and to talk about it.